A very good morning to one and all present here. It is both an honor and a privilege to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you on this momentous occasion. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of hosting our distinguished guests, Honorable Professor Dr. Bharat H. Desai and Honorable Ambassador Fabian, who is here with us today to share insights on a topic of utmost importance. It is under the aegis of Symbiosis International Deemed University, Pune, that Symbiosis Law School Noida and Symbiosis Law School Pune have organized the first Professional Rahamatullah Khan Memorial Public Lecture on the theme Revitalizing the United Nations for Our Common Future, Making International Law Work. The Rahamatullah Khan Memorial Public Lecture aims at celebrating the enduring legacy of one of the most distinguished legal scholars. His scholarly contributions have left an indelible mark on the legal landscape, impacting the academic community and society at large. The proposed public lecture aims to honor the memory and contribution of Professor Rahamatullah Khan in the field of international law and inspiring the next generation, to promote intellectual discourse and knowledge sharing on the theme Revitalizing the United Nations for Our Common Future, Making International Law Work. I would now like to invite Professor Dr. Shashikala Gurpur, Dean Faculty of Law, Symbiosis International Deemed University, Director, Symbiosis Law School, Pune, Fulbright Scholar Jean Monnet Chair Professor, who has joined us virtually today to commence today's lecture by delivering the welcome address as she introduces Professor Rahamatullah Khan. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
And our dear colleague, Dr. Rahamatullah, who is the host of this program, and all our dear students from the Faculty of Law who have joined us offline in Noida and online in Nagpur, in Pune, and from Hyderabad. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Now, we conceptualized this event as the event under the Faculty of Law in Symbiosis International University as a kind of off classroom, or what we call as beyond classroom learning, at the juncture of some of the very sad international developments, and also to commemorate the great life of a great academic who was one of the pioneers in the study, teaching, and research of international law in this country, late Dr. Professor Rahamatullah Khan. I would like to welcome the students there. I know that you are on the threshold of a festive season, yet you have made it a point to come and attend this lecture. So thank you very much for making it in big numbers in SLS Noida. And I should also thank the leadership of Dr. Rahamatullah for organizing this lecture with the meticulous details. First of all, I should also bring on record that it was the idea suggested by Professor Bharat Desai because recently he had a lecture about another late professor, R.P. Anand, conducted with the O.P. Jindal Global University, where the contribution of Professor Anand to international law was hailed and described in the context of modern developments in international law. Today is another such occasion under another banner, which is very, very illustrious under Symbiosis International Deemed University, the university which was created in 2002 as a kind of natural evolution from excellence from the earlier institutes of Symbiosis, of which Symbiosis Law School Pune is the foremost. I must tell you that established in 1977, today, as all of you know, that Symbiosis Law School Pune is the flagship institute in the family of Symbiosis institutions, consistently ranked among the top 5 to top 10 law schools in the country. In the National Institutional Ranking Framework, we have made it ever since the beginning to the top 10. And once we even came up to top 3. It's no small feat for a private law school. A private law school which is offering education at a very reasonable kind of expense with all the hallmarks of excellence and which is globally benchmarked as well. in terms of collaboration and robust internationalization, for which we won the award at the national level way back in 2021, among other many other feats in community legal service, student achievements, moot achievements, and glorious alumni who have been in the leadership of many law firms, in the judiciary, in high courts, among others. Now, with that in the background, we should also be very humble to submit before you, all of you who are present online and offline, that Symbiosis International University is known for its innovation in education across 8 faculties, of which the Faculty of Law is the oldest. Now, the achievement of the law school led to its duplication on parallel with the duplication of SABM, which was till then the flagship institute in the Faculty of Management. And Faculty of Management was the one for which Symbiosis was mostly known. So when the law entered the leagues of premier law schools consistently, the duplication of the law school happened because the demand soared high in the sky from about 1,750 applications for 300 seats to a number which you would be surprised to know for a singular law school, or now with the 4 other law schools in total, up to about 25,000 by about 2013. So this couldn't be possible but for the quality students that we attract, contribution of parents, stakeholders like Dr. Fabian or Dr. Bharat, among others. So Symbiosis International University, with the founder, Dr. S.B. Muzumdar sir's vision, always was setting benchmarks in whatever it did, especially in the niche areas where we created our specialized institutes, in niche areas where our activities continue. Because of the kind of products whom we transformed in our various institutions, Government of India, communities, international players, everybody was attracted to Symbiosis International University, and they collaborated their bit to make this a world-class university and institute. And you know that now we are in the global ranking as well, moving between 500 to 800 to 1,000 universities across the world, which is again a great achievement. So that was possible only because of the openness, the liberal approach, interdisciplinarity that we believe in Founders Life, Founders Vision, and all of us who are in different levels of leadership, in a way, cascading that vision. So today's event is one such reflection. You might have already heard Dr. Fabian, Professor Mr. Fabian. In our law school, he has been frequently visiting, and also in Hyderabad, where he has educated us in latest areas of development and also gave us the bits of his golden experience as the ambassador, especially during the Kuwaiti crisis. In addition to that, Professor Bharat Desai has been associated with Symbiosis International University from 2008 itself. Dr. Desai has been in the forefront of guiding us in environmental law research, today climate change law and policy center projects, and many other things which we have been receiving European grants for, couldn't have been possible but for somebody like Professor Desai being deeply involved with our ventures. So this learning beyond the classroom for all of you, from the experiential bits, critical thinking and viewpoints from experts like this, is going to enrich your classroom learning. And we also believe all of us grew like that as students and as academics in learning from such stalwarts. So I thank Dr. Ravandale for leading this and also bringing it to the students of SLS Noida. I'm very sorry I couldn't be there personally, but I would have loved to listen to the questions of the students and their participation. I can see some of you, your glimpse, and we feel so enthralled because you are an extension of our classrooms, beyond reach though. So it's a great joy to see your young faces there and your energies, and also my esteemed faculty who are decorating the front line there. I must tell you that my own personal association with Professor Khan happened way back in 1991. Khan sir was a senior faculty by then. He was a dean, a chairperson rather, of the Center for Studies in Diplomacy, International Law and Economics. Dear colleagues and students, I must tell you that that first meeting was in his residence because my friend and neighbor, or 3-4 generation family friend, was the wife of a librarian there. That's how I met Professor Khan in his residence. And the simplicity of the man, the classy way of communicating in English, the demeanor of the person was so it was so enthralling that I felt that unless a person is so knowledgeable, they couldn't be this humble. And then in the first meeting itself, Professor Khan was very impressive. He was very impressed with the desire for learning, which now you all also reflect there. So he suggested that Society of International Law needs to be strengthened. Study of international law needs to be strengthened in our country. I tell you, this was pre-liberalization, pre-globalization period. And the team in JNU was already rich with Professor Bharat Desai, Professor Chimney, and students like Vijay Hegde, who are now the faculty. So I was thinking that, at that time, I tell you, I was in the beginning of my career. I was 2 years into my teaching. And he showed me a huge possibility. So also his colleagues. I met Professor Chimney as well. I had gone to discuss my PhD idea. And I tell you, by 1995, I was in Europe, and my PhD brought me so many possibilities, including European publications, big grants, developing a course on biotechnology, number of courses in IP in this Symbiosis forum. So with the inspiration that I received from this great soul, when I came to Symbiosis Law School, Pune, as a director and dean, my colleague Dr. Ravandale then was the deputy director. Both of us took the initiative. Dr. Ravandale was back from his studies in Cardiff, so he also had that passion for making it internationalized, because once you see the best practices in other places, you feel for your nation, you feel for the next generation of students. So we decided we will invite Dr. Khan, because in this country, if there's anybody who is senior, who has mentored generations of teachers, this is the man who should come. So he inaugurated our first conference. I still remember lighting the lamp and inaugurating the conference in our old building in the auditorium. So Dr. Khan's association brought many others from JNU closer to us. And today you know where we stand in terms of our commitment and work in international law across 4 law schools. And university itself is christened as International University. So Dr. Khan's persona, although I had very little privilege of being close to, was something that was of a visionary international scholar. Why visionary? Because he was able to attract the best talent, develop them, give them the ability to be capability and opportunity to be leaders. I remember Professor Subramania, who is still my mentor, guide, and friend, who is the dean of CMR Law School. Professor Subramania, coming from our hometown, emerged as an international specialist, not only academically, but Professor Khan deputed him to an opportunity in the Middle East, and he emerged as a full-rounded consultant academic. Today also, it's a delight to listen to Professor Subramania, and you know Professor Chimney is one of the renowned names. Dr. Desai has guided so many students, and he is one of the most reckoned names in international environmental law, who has been very much in vogue in international and national fora. So Sir's scholarship, late Dr. Khan's scholarship, was that of a pioneer in the field of international law, and particularly in the law of international organization. So as an honoring, befitting tribute, today the theme is woven around international organizations at a time when the whole world is looking at international organizations with an array of suspicion, disbelief, and a mixed kind of hope. So I think unveiling this kind of an anxiety in the memory of the great possibility that professors like Dr. Khan showed is a very apt theme for today's discussion and deliberation. Dr. Khan began as the teacher, and then he was the professor of international law in his lifetime of almost 90 years. At the turn of the 90th year, means at 89 he expired. He was the dean of School of International Studies. He was the rector of JNU. He was also the recipient of the Humboldt Research Award in recognition of achievements in teaching and research. He also had served as the counsel for Iran in 2 cases of Iran-US Claims Tribunal in The Hague in the 80s. Now, what does that show? The possibility for an academic, the possibility for a lawyer to keep the academic passion, research, teaching, studies, and also practically being relevant to international law. Dr. Khan authored several books, scholarly articles across the field of international law, and his meticulous research took the shape of notable books in the area of implied powers of United Nations, Kashmir and the United Nations, law of international trade transactions, all in the 70s. All these books came in the 70s. Iran and United States claims, tribunal controversies, cases and contribution in the 90s. And then International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, Law and Practice with P.C. Rao, he co-authored in 2001. So he was very active for almost 4 decades in the peak of contribution to international law from India. I tell you, today when we have scholarship or scholar names in international law, mostly names from the West are taken. But Jawaharlal Nehru University, beginning with Dr. Khan, alongside many others like R.P. Anand and today Hegde, Chimney and Desai Sir, they all created a different tradition of international law. While down south, P.C. Rao, Alexandrovic and others created this scholarship. Now this scholarship today has come of age and of relevance. Dr. Khan's own work received wide acclaim from his peers as well as his reviewers on his books, the scholarship of his time, and all which was published in the journals at that time. His postdoctoral positions as Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, Princeton University, Yale Law School, Columbia Law School, University of Hawaii, and Max Planck Institute of International Law. And especially in Max Planck, he held the fellowship in 1971, 77, 83, 88, 99 to 2005. Imagine the consistency of performance shows what a serious, passionate, and dedicated scholar he was. He was editor-in-chief of Indian Journal of International Law between 1979 and 2013, served 2 terms as the Secretary General of the Society, and after his demise, we have had other leadership, especially by his former student, Dr. Desai, who paid his rich tributes in terms of glimpse to the scholarly life of Dr. Khan. And today is one such event where he is going to provide insights, especially regarding the elegant writing style, sharp legal analysis, and contemporary approach of Dr. Khan. I don't know if it is appropriate, but I must tell you, dear students and fellow colleagues and the dignitaries on the dais, I heard from many discourses that my own mentor, late Dr. Madhav Menon, although I would consider Dr. Khan also as mentor, but Dr. Madhav Menon has been a long-term mentor because I believe in his capacity to, or rather I'm a great admirer and follower of his capacity to manifest. I believe that just writing and talking are one thing, but manifesting in institutionalization and building institutions as a way of capturing and, keeping the repository and resources of knowledge and people in a structured manner is a greater achievement. So late Dr. Menon always shines as a great example of a legal academic for me because of that power of manifestation of legal jobs, legal opportunities, careers, and serious scholarship and the institutionalization. But I must tell you in this August house and August occasion that in envisioning the idea of National Law School, although Dr. Menon came forward to manifest, behind him was the greater document and the vision document which was created and circulated by late Dr. Khan. This is one truth which needs to be unveiled today, and I'm sure Dr. Desai will vouch by the truth of that, which was circulated by Dr. Khan to the intelligentsia of the country, across the country, taking everyone along with all the diversity and regional variations of legal scholarship and belief in the power of international law. Now, we also had Dr. Bakshi contributing to the vision. We had Dr. Chimney and others, next generation scholars participating in the vision. But I must tell you that it's only the heart of compassion that can formulate the vision. And it's only with the vision which looks beyond present to the times to come, with the utmost compassion for the generations to come, in the spirit of preserver of knowledge, resources, and culture, and respect and love and nurturing for the next generation, only that such eminence that India could open up to. I'm sure that with the firm hands, the strong hands of a younger generation who is sitting in this auditorium and connecting beyond this auditorium are going to be our hope. They are going to be our future. And they are 65% of this country's demography. And America had its distinct advantage 200 years ago when it witnessed such a youth population, young population. And I'm sure on the threshold of this new hope that today's lecture and today's deliberation will rekindle the power of international law through the Indian voices, Indian actors, and Indian practice coming to the center stage of age in the deliberations that have gone by and the deliberations that are going to happen. Welcome one and all. And once again, I record my gratitude and my appreciation for all those who have made this possible today, including my colleague, Dr. Bindu, who is spearheading the Research Excellence Center of our Faculty of Law, SCALSER, in all the unseen efforts, along with the team that we have here and the team in Noida and the leadership in other two law schools of ours. Welcome one and all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the welcome address and for bringing so much optimism among the crowd. May I now introduce to you all our keynote speaker for the day, Ambassador Fabian, former IFS officer and ambassador, and distinguished visiting faculty, Symbiosis Law School, Pune. Ambassador Fabian served in Indian Foreign Service from 1964 to 2000, when he retired as ambassador to Italy and permanent representative to UN in Rome. Earlier, he was ambassador to Finland and Qatar, apart from serving as acting High Commission in Canada during the Blue Star operation, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's assassination, and the Kanishka bombing. As Joint Secretary, Ambassador Fabian was the focal point for the evacuation of about 176,000 Indians from Kuwait and Iraq in 1991. He witnessed the 1979 revolution in Iran as counselor in the embassy there. Since his retirement as an ambassador, Fabian has published the following books: Common Sense on War on Iraq, India in the 21st Century, Diplomacy, Indian Style, The Arab Spring That Was and Wasn't. Sir, we are truly honored to have you here with us today. I welcome you to kindly come forward for the keynote address on international organization and contemporary geopolitics.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Professor Dr. Bharat Desai, our gracious host, Professor Dr. C. Rahamatullah, Professor Dr. Shashikala Gurpur, thank you, whom we had the privilege of listening right now. Very insightful. Thank you, Dr. Shashikala. But I should confess, I belong to the old school. I would have preferred to have seen her here with us. Thank you, Sabya Kanwar, for that cordial and cordially long introduction, demonstrating with mathematical precision that I am the youngest in this assembly. Well, frankly, between you and me, it's very difficult to follow Professor Dr. Shashikala and to precede Professor Bharat. Well, rare privilege and high honor to be with you. But before I proceed further, let me thank Sankalp, who came and picked me up in the morning. He was a true, what shall I say, friend, philosopher, and guide. Now, to be in this campus, to be with you, well, it's very exciting. And if I have my life again. You know, we in India believe in more than one life. You know why? Ars longa, vita brevis. You know, art is long, life is short. So we need more than one life to find out all about. So I would certainly come and study at Symbiosis. Now, I want to thank Professor Dr. Rahamatullah and also Dr. Shashikala Gurpur for your gracious collaboration with the India International Center when we organized that one-day program on international humanitarian law. Maybe some of you had come there at that time. And if I may say so, what struck me is that our young scholars asked very pertinent and at times difficult questions. But they also contributed to finding the answers. That was a big thing about symbiosis. Now, the theme is, international organizations and contemporary geopolitics. As we all know, the world is in turmoil. Well, it's like this, if political leaders, if they can listen to Professor Dr. Rahamatullah Khan, and if they can behave responsibly, then we shall have a world with less turmoil, a better world where we get the best out of every human being and for the common good. In fact, the other day I wrote saying that what is now happening in Israel and Palestine, I say Israel and Palestine, not in Israel and Gaza, as some of our media people do, shows the moral bankruptcy of political leadership across the globe. Anyway. Now, obviously, the most important international organization is the United Nations. As 18th century French philosopher Voltaire said about God, if God did not exist, it would have been necessary to, invent him. Now, I have a problem with the last word, him. But leaving that aside, what Voltaire said about God applies to the United Nations also. You might have heard some comments in the Indian media about the futility of the United Nations and the utility of G20. Well, I'm sorry to say, reflection will show those comments were not, what shall I say, they don't hold water. Now, the United Nations. It was established, as we all know, 1945, following the World War II. The grim toll was 70 to 85 million. 70 to 85 million human beings died, or rather, they were killed by their fellow human beings. And I don't want to say how many Germans, how many Russians, and all that. Why? Tell me, when we go to the next world, do we take our passport with us? Okay. Now, let's take a holistic view of how the United Nations has fared since 1945. I'll put it this way. You can say that the United Nations has failed, but let us be a little more analytical. And to do that, to my mind, subject to correction, let us look at the United Nations in 5 parts. We start with the General Assembly, which passes resolutions not enforceable. You know the recent resolution on Israel-Palestine calling for a ceasefire. 120 voted for it. Now, you know how contemptuously, I'm using the word deliberately, the Israeli foreign minister dismissed it. And how he said that the Secretary General should resign because he asked for a humanitarian pause. And how he cancelled his appointment with the Secretary General. And how Israel said no visa for UN officials. Well, so that is what happens to, not all, but some of the General Assembly resolutions. But let's look at the big picture. The General Assembly also does many other important things. Just to give one example, it creates fresh international law. One example, UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. Now, the second part of the United Nations, Security Council. Most powerful theoretically, but it can suffer from self-paralysis. Well, the Security Council, as we all know, entrusted with the prime responsibility to maintain international peace and security. In plain English, it has signally failed. As of now, Ukraine, the war is raging, started in February 2022. Israel, we know. The grim toll has crossed 10,000. Now, that is the score of the Security Council. The third part, ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council, and specialized agencies, WHO, UNICEF, UNESCO. Now, they do a lot of good. In fact, you may remember that the Security Council imposed sanctions on Iraq after Saddam Hussein foolishly decided to have a picnic in Kuwait. Well, for 13 years, those sanctions remained, denying the people of Iraq potable water, food, medicines, and other necessities. That is one part of the United Nations Security Council. But the other part we are now mentioning, ECOSOC and the specialized agencies, they were working hard to provide potable water, to provide medicines to the Iraqi population. See how one part of the United Nations does a lot of damage. In fact, I would call it genocidal sanctions. You can look up, or you know already, the definition of genocide, 1948 Convention for Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. Actually, in fact, that adjective was used by a senior UN official, who was in charge of Iraq. Holiday. So, that is what it is. Now comes Now, on sanctions, I want to make a point. The attitude of the United States counts. You must have heard of Madeleine Albright. She was Secretary of State. She was PR to United Nations. Incidentally, her actual name was not Albright. It was Albrecht. C-H-T. Czech name. But once she came to the United States, you change your name so that Americans can pronounce it. So she brightened herself up, Albright. Okay, now I'm talking about 1996. Sanctions on Iraq were on, and at that time, UNICEF had reckoned that 200 babies were dying a day. 200 babies dying a day, thanks to sanctions. So, CBC television asked Madam Albright, do you think, this heavy price, is it worth paying? You know the story, WMD, weapons of mass destruction with Saddam Hussein, which he was not surrendering. Well, let me quote what she said. I think this is a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it. Fast forward, 2003, George W. Bush invades and occupies Iraq on the plea that he had to take out the WMD. Well, after Saddam Hussein was felled, they sent out inspectors looking for WMD. 1,625 UN/US inspectors went there. They inspected 1,700 sites for 2 years. They spent more than $1 billion, and they didn't find WMD. So the correct expansion of WMD is weapons of mass deception. And the other day, Symbiosis, there was another occasion, and I was saying that, there is a book which has come out, George W. Bush, a war criminal. Okay, now, the last part of now comes the ICJ, fourth part. Again, not enforceable, practically. You can take it to the Security Council, but when the charter was being negotiated, it was a very loose language, and Norway wanted stronger language, and Cuba produced stronger language, but America didn't want it. So, if it deems fit, we'll make recommendations. Now, to whom the Security Council is going to make recommendations? To whom? So, it is very, deliberately, weakly drafted article. The last, but not the least, Secretary General and the Secretariat. The Secretary General, as we know, sends special envoys before or after the war has broken out. Before, so that the war doesn't break out. After, in order to bring out a ceasefire followed by negotiations. Now, the special envoys do not always succeed, but it's not their fault. Between you and me, you can take a horse to a stream, but can you make it drink? The belligerents will agree to a ceasefire either when they are completely exhausted or when good sense has dawned on them that more killing is not going to help anyone. So it is not the fault of the special envoys. It is not the fault of the UN. Okay? Now, did I say that the Security Council has signally failed? But let's ask the question, why? Answer is simple. The P5 have not found it possible to agree on what to do. And each of them has a veto. So, let us speak in plain English. The P5 have failed to behave responsibly. President Roosevelt's idea of 5 policemen keeping law and order in the global village, that was rather naive, because these policemen themselves have been committing crimes and they are above the law and they have their own clients. When there is a war, they support one against the other. So, we need to reform the Security Council, and India qualifies to be there as a permanent member from every criterion. But does it mean that India is going to be there in the near future? I doubt it. Why? Well, I won't go into it, but I don't think India has been going about it the right way. So, to conclude, the United Nations is a forum for member states to meet, discuss, negotiate, and come to an agreement without resorting to violence. But if the member states don't want to behave responsibly, if they don't want to avail of the forum, well, if they don't want to respect the agreements and treaties they have signed into, well, their behavior has to change. Now, I am so glad to, the title of the memorial lecture is Revitalizing the United Nations. Well, the United Nations certainly should be revitalized. But the best way to do that is for member states to behave responsibly. Thank you so much.
A resounding round of applause for our distinguished guest, Honorable Fabian, who has just graced us with an enlightening and thought-provoking address on international organization. In today's rapidly changing world, where geopolitical shifts happen and the course of nations changes, your expertise has eliminated the intricacies of international relations. Your ability, sir, to articulate the nuances of contemporary geopolitics has left an indelible mark on our understanding of the interconnectedness that binds us all. Once again, thank you so much. I would now like to take the privilege of introducing to you all Professor Dr. Bharat H. Desai. Professor Desai, we welcome you all today here with us. Professor Desai is Professor of International Law, Jawaharlal Nehru Chair and Chairperson of Center for International Legal Studies in School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He serves as Editor-in-Chief of the Environmental Policy and Law. Professor Desai's significant books in international law include Regulating Global Climate Change from Common Concern to Planetary Concern, Soil Law and Governance in India, Sexual and Gender-Based Violence in International Law, Making International Institutions Work, and there are many more that are added to the list. Professor Desai has mooted proposals for United Nations Environment Protection Organization, revival and repurpose of the UN Trusteeship Council with the new mandate for environment and the global commons, as well as International Environment Court. These cutting-edge ideas have been published in journals of international repute, such as the Repurposed Trusteeship Council for the Future, Environmental Policy and Law, ICTs as the New Environmental Sentinels, Environmental Policy and Law, the Quest for a UN Specialized Agency for the Environment, the Roundtable, and many more. Professor Desai's ideas and proposals have received accolades in official communications from the President of the 73rd UN General Assembly, the UN Secretary General Antonio, and Office of the President of the Human Rights Council, as well as the Prime Ministers of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the Presidents of Brazil, France, and the Russian Federation. Professor Desai has been consulted by the Indian Prime Minister's Office, the Union Ministries of Environment and Forests, and Ministry of External Affairs, as well as inducted as a member of the official Indian delegations to various intergovernmental negotiations. Professor Desai initiated and coordinated knowledge initiatives such as the Making SIS Visible as a Think Tank and the four-partner Jammu and Kashmir and Inter-University Consortium on Himalayan Cryosphere. We welcome you, sir. We kindly welcome you to come up on stage and enlighten the crowd.
Well, good afternoon to all. It's indeed a great pleasure and privilege for me to be here at the Symbiosis Law School Greater Noida campus. It's again, I'm really deeply touched by a gracious invitation by my esteemed friend and colleague, Dr. Shashikala Gurpur, the Dean and the Director of the Symbiosis Law School Pune, and I hold her in very high esteem. She values scholars and scholarship. She has been for a long time in touch with my center. She has been a PhD examiner and always has been very, very receptive to many of the ideas. And also she has been very graceful in making me to come down to Pune at the Symbiosis Law School on many of the occasions. And these are very few places in India where I make it a point to visit. You feel delighted to be there. Now this special lecture, which is Shashi has very graciously organized in honor of my late teacher, Professor Rahamatullah Khan. This is in quick succession to the previous lecture which Shashi already mentioned, to my another teacher, Professor Ram Prakash Anand, which I had again the honor to deliver at the Jindal Law School on 14th of September 2023. And this is available on the YouTube channel of both JNU as well as Jindal Law School. Now, the very purpose of hosting this lecture in honor of my esteemed teacher, for multiple reasons. This could have been very well organized in my own home turf, my university, my center. But I thought that Shashi was again very graceful in conferring Lifetime Achievement Award on Professor Rahamatullah Khan a couple of years ago in Pune. And I remember, meeting Professor Khan's again late daughter Meher, when she came to Pune to receive this award because Professor Khan couldn't travel, to receive that Lifetime Achievement Award. And so I think it was in the fitness of things that again Shashi would be gracious host to organize this memorial lecture after Professor Khan passed away in the month of March. I did organize the tribute in my own center. Now, this lecture actually coincides with quickly a few days after the 78th anniversary of the United Nations, which went on 24th of October 2023. United Nations has completed 78 years, defying all logic. All those prophets of doomsday who thought that, well, United Nations may not last longer because its predecessor entity, the League of Nations, did not last long. It just lasted 20 years or so. And this again a kind of a legacy which came quickly, after the end of the second World War, And so my focus primarily would be, I'll try to primarily focus upon the genesis of the whole thing, how the topic which I chose largely for the reason that Professor Khan in his initial years, including his PhD thesis, was on law of international organizations. His primary PhD thesis was on the implied powers of United Nations, which came up published as a book in 1970, which was his pioneering work, and one of the very rare contributions on which I will build my edifice about within this available time to me. How this United Nations was the fulcrum around that time, and then followed it up with how the law of organization, which he himself taught as a MPhil student, he taught me, and that sheer interpretation of the Charter of United Nations which he hammered. He was a person of few words. He'll speak very less, and whatever little period he'll try to explain or put you on that particular thing, like starting with the classical work by Leland, Goodrich, and Hambro on the Charter of United Nations. That entire commentaries on the Charter of United Nations, I still vividly remember having a very close look at it during my student. That remained with me, to see those intricacies and nuances of the Charter of United Nations, which very few people will have the understanding. A lot of people, they don't understand United Nations. There is lot of I would say misunderstanding about it. A lot of people, and that is primarily the reason, that a huge amount of, as I said, the ignorance about this particular entity, and that is exactly why we need to know the animal. We need to understand United Nations, If you want to know, and that is exactly how we need to celebrate that the very fact that this entity has been there, notwithstanding all the limitations of it, And we need to understand, as I explained, my own students, repeatedly, both in MPhil and PhD, as well as in my MA class, because there is a lot of skepticism that does United Nations work? Does international law work? And there is a quick dismissive, derisory, or this kind of a very negative connotations, that don't you think that United Nations has failed? But the very fact that you don't know the animal, because this is a human construct. As the human beings are not infallible, this human created institution cannot be infallible. It carries the same limitation, which was purposefully designed that way. Whatever the limitations United Nations has, they were purposefully inserted. It was not created, as one scholar said, in a fit of absent-mindedness. It was done with a carefully calibrated manner to ensure that all those rival interests, all those people who have that kind of a competing considerations, were accommodated, because that is exactly what the human life is about. You need to accommodate people with diverse interests, different kind of a considerations. So here is a structure which was created, by sovereign states for sovereign state. It's a platform for institutionalized form of cooperation. Okay, it was not to lead the humankind to heaven. It was to prevent the humankind, going to hell. That was exactly, I would say, the very purpose of United Nations when it came to be created. Now let me see how I was initiated into the whole thing. Again, as I said, like Professor R.P. Anand put me in the field of environment, because earlier I did my MPhil dissertation on legal aspects of Palestine question and United Nations. So I studied the entire working of the UN system, the General Assembly, the Security Council, the role of the Secretary General, and the kind of the implied powers which, So once I shifted the base, this was my beginning, and my proposal, which I worked as a Humboldt Fellow, which actively, in consultation with Professor Khan, it culminated in this, one of the very pioneering work, which is published in, I would say, proud to say, in Indian Journal of International Law. This was actually presented both at the legal department of the World Bank on 15th of January 1999, followed by a quick succession, a lecture on 9th of March 1999 at the Max Planck Institute in Heidelberg. And when the director of the Max Planck Institute asked me to give this paper to be published in Heidelberg Journal of International Law. Again, at the behest of Professor Khan, I gave it for the Indian Journal of International Law, although it was delayed by almost a year and a half. But finally, when it was published, I had to procure the reprint of this paper, and to send it to different places, because the Indian Journal of International Law did not have the circulation of that nature. So this was my kind of a very detailed foray. This was the time when I started doing my work, on the whole notion of what is called institutionalization. And this is exactly, I would say, that I'll give this credit to Professor Rahamatullah Khan. The whole notion of institutionalization, which subsequently took the shape of a concrete book published in 2004 by transnational publisher from New York. And I have acknowledged that one full paragraph devoted to Professor Rahamatullah Khan, and he was touched by it. This came much after his retirement, almost 5 years after retirement. And he told me that, bete, 5 saal ke baad koi yaad karta hai apne teacher ko? I said, yes, that is exactly I wanted to do. I said, I do it. And so I dedicated that work to Professor Rahamatullah Khan, and always used to say, log Guruji keh ke mere piche chalte the, baatein karte the. You are the only one who keep in touch with me. Wherever I am, you call me. And so I used to be always with him, even including at the Max Planck Institute in Heidelberg, and the outline of that subsequent work, and this is the pioneering work published in the Indian Journal of International Law, volume 40, issue number 3, 2000. If somebody is interested, maybe of interest to you, And this is again follow up with that, because this is the book which I mentioned to you. This is I would say, both the title of the book as well as the outline of the book. The credit goes to Professor Khan. And I said, I have no hesitation, even after almost full 20 years, that this was my pioneering work, and I call it the trilogy. This led to this work in 2010, again on understanding the host country, host institution agreements, which was one of the important aspects which Professor Khan himself dealt with in his own PhD thesis. It was the implied powers of United Nations, which he submitted, when I would say late Judge Nagendra Singh, he was his supervisor, and obviously Professor R.P. Anand also checked his PhD thesis. But this also led to the intricacies of the, I would say, what I call it the host country agreement. This is a very delicate part, and I have covered many of those host country. I dug out those host country agreements and host institution, that what it means by it, Like the United States, United Nations has the host country agreement with the United States of America, and it finally led to this work, international environmental governance in 2014. So it's called the trilogy. So the foundation which was laid, again it goes back to that particular time. Now this is the structure. I would say, I hope I will not. It will not be much strain upon you people, but I hope you will pardon me. At least you will endure this thing. I will try to squeeze as much as possible, but I thought I'll make it very structured one. My talk will revolve around these 5 important parts. One is the setting, second is the making of the United Nations, the third is the working of the UN, the fourth is the reform talk, and lastly, towards our common future. And I'll try to do justice to these parts. Let me first start with the setting, and I thought let me before I actually go into this part, I thought I'll share few of my personal reminiscences, because that will give a special flavor this memorial talk. I already mentioned about how my work took the shape in the initial part, putting me on the hardcore law of international organization, trying to put value so far as the entire institutional architecture of United Nations was concerned, the role of the respective organs of United Nations, the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Secretariat headed by the Secretary General of United Nations, and obviously the role of the International Court of it. So I will not have the time to go into those parts. There are skepticism, lot of pessimism, etc. But the hardcore, those who know about the law of international, there is not much. My very purpose of this lecture is to dispel that pessimism, negativity, or that kind of a derisory look, about failure of United. My whole look will be to construct that positivity, to take it seriously, to accept the entity with the limitation which it has, for instance, So one is, of course, a couple of other personal recollections I would mention that, well, Professor Khan always, almost I saw him, I grew with him, when I came I was just 22, 23, And and whenever there was some personal task, he will assign it to me, and I'll do it. I will always do it. He knew, he could rely upon me. And I remember a couple of concrete things. For instance, I used to have a lot of discussion with him, especially about how a lot of people turning up very smart and doing this, not publishing those things, And one mantra which he gave me, that has remained with. That is exactly what I would say. It changed my entire outlook to the people, the places, and the kind of the problematic that we face, in a country like India. I would say, was in a chaste Hindi, because he said when he spoke Hindi, it was basically Urdu. He was from Andhra Pradesh. And he said, "Dekho bete, सीधी बात है. You should not go to what the others are doing. तुम्हें ये देखना है, तुम्हें दूसरों से बेहतर तुम कैसे बनोगे. How you are different than others, And that is exactly the kind of the mantra which all of us will need to do it, Because a lot of people will be there, a lot of people will have shortcuts, those things, And that gave me a different, like when you say the glass is half full or glass is half empty. You need to change your outlook to the people, because there are always going to be people, who will have the shortcuts in life, who will be very smart, And that stayed with me, to take the look, very, very, very concrete, hard, positive look to the issues, the problem that we face. Second important, I would say, the personal recollection I can mention, is, I remember, he had financial problems, and I was in a position in the year, 1998 or so, to do something. I had some position, I had some project with me when I went outside, And I remember I brought a check and went to his house and put that check in his lap, Although I said I will do the work and I'll show you as the coordinator, And he said, I'm really touched by it. He said, I know it very well. Even my sons will never do this for me, I will not mention the figure. I do not want to undermine the saying. It will be, I would say staggering sum, today's price almost. It will be 15 to 20 times. And not only I did for Professor Khan, let me add, even for my other senior colleagues, late Professor V.S. Mani and the Bhupinder Chimney, who is now currently teaching at Jindal Law School, they can verify. Chimney is the only surviving person. Somebody can go and check with him. So what I'm saying is, I'm not doing anything special, I said I'm not doing anything special, but if I can really do it, I have to walk the talk. I don't need to say merely sir, And I think that is exactly what you need to, value things, I'm saying that you reach out, saying that can I do something for you, That is also another important kind of a thing which she realized. And lastly, I remember one day, Professor Anand used to be there, and I used to go to his room, and then I'll call Professor Khan. Three of us will sit there. I could have shown the picture, which is with me, but I missed out, And one day, Professor Khan got the re-employment, and two of the colleagues were very unhappy, and I saw it with my own eyes. They stopped talking to Professor R.P. Anand, And then nearby doors, ground floor, first floor, and then Professor Anand was very unhappy, and he said, "Khan sahab, dekhiye to sahi, ye kya waqt aa gaya hai? Jinko bada kiya, jinko padhaya kaya, वो बात नहीं करते हैं, नाराज है कि अभी मुझे मिल गया हुआ है, हमारा क्या होगा, हमें कौन याद करेगा?" एंड तब खान साहब ने अपनी उर्दू में कहा, कि आनंद साहब आप फिक्र मत करिए, ये लड़का बैठा है ना, ये हमें याद करेगा. You will do. And this is exactly what I'm saying. I'm proud to say that I'm here to do that justice, to my teacher who died unsung. I would say, we need to pay the tribute to the people, because you grow on the shoulders not only your parents, but also your teachers. All of us we do it. We should never ever discount that. Like movie Bagban mein kehta hai na, कि parents are not the stepping stone to grow. Same is the case with the teachers. That don't do it. Don't never say कि that is all history, or you did it, so what? You must be grateful. You must acknowledge everything. Only then it accrues something good to you. And here I am, to do that, pay my tribute to my teacher, on the basis of that pioneering work which he did. Let me now provide you some concrete basis. The entire context of the work which Professor Rahamatullah Khan did, was, as I said, his PhD thesis was on the implied powers of United Nations, and this was very rare kind of a subject on which not many people had really dabbled into. But this was 1949 advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice provided the backdrop, where I will not go into the great details, but this was the time when, for instance, the first UN mediator in Palestine, Count Foch Bernadotte, was assassinated, again by one of the then, Jewish, terror group, Stern gang, one of the members later on became the Prime Minister of Israel, and the question arose that with the assassination of Count Bernadotte, who was a UN civil servant, does United Nations have the capacity to bring an international claim? And this question was referred to the International Court of Justice, and the International Court of Justice, because it went into the whole issue, and the court explicitly said the charter does not expressly confer upon the organization the capacity to include in its claim for reparation the damage caused to the victim or to the persons entitled through him. And finally, the court opined that under international law, the organization must be deemed to have those powers, must be presumed to have those powers, that you must be construed to have it. It's an inherent power. Like the human rights are, you are born with human rights. Nobody is not, none of the gift of human beings, Like the charter, the very fact that this charter was created by the sovereign state for the sovereign state, you must presume, or you must be deemed to have those powers, which though not expressly provided in the charter, are conferred upon it by necessary implication. It's presumed, it's already interwoven, inextricably part of the charter, as being essential to the performance of the duty, because unless you do that, the organization cannot perform its task, in that particular sense. And this was the starting point of inquiry for Professor Khan, when he did this work, implied powers of United. He has gone into a lot of other power issues also, and this was basically, relied upon the legal personality of the Covenant of the League of Nations, which was created, set up in Geneva. Swiss government had conferred upon the League of Nations that kind of a power, because it had the agreement with the establishment of the League headquarters, in Geneva. Similarly, they had done it for the International Labour Organization, International Telecommunication Union, Institute for Agriculture and International Telecommunication. So those issues were very much, that was the background in which this came up. And so Professor Khan's, inquiry addressed that twilight zone, which separated the express authority from specific prohibition. That what is, because not everything in life is, and that is exactly the thing which you will find in international law. What about the legal status of the activities which are not expressly prohibited by international law? Are they permissible? That is the predicament which the humankind has faced. That is exactly the issue which was also referred to the International Law Commission. Not everything is said. Some of the agreements also have, some kind of a quietness, So what kind of can there be some kind of a tacit approval, some kind of an implied kind of thing? And that is exactly what Professor Khan seek to address, areas like peacekeeping, treaty making powers, membership, admissions, etc., and UN's subsidiary organs, etc., etc. And this is exactly what I try to do based upon it in my own work, published by Cambridge University Press, in 2010, the host country, host institution agreement, And I thought before I move forward, let me, for the first time, I'm putting this in public domain, I thought, like I talk about doing justice, giving credit, acknowledging some of the contribution, done by something, and this was again part of one of the very rare kind of personal moments when Professor Khan had given me one of the reprints of his publication, which very rarely people remember and give credit to him. I have got this publication, which is 50 years old, published, and this will directly of interest to all the students, the faculty, and all those administrators of the National Law Schools of India. This is the proposal on the National School of Law, a proposal written by none other than Professor Rahamatullah Khan, published, I think it was published under the University of Pune, and published in a book called Legal Education in India: Problems and Perspectives, 1973. And you can see I have quoted the specific paragraphs, where the proposed National Law School will have to structure its programs on two levels. First, select a cadre of researchers drawn from different disciplines, say law, sociology, political science. That is exactly how the structure of most of the law schools is, for instance, And proposed National Law School could be constructed on another model, an advanced research center for comparative law, An advantage of establishing a National School of Law on the European pattern of comparative law institute are greater, So I hope and pray. I will not go into the greater detail. I have got the original copy. I can make a scan copy and circulate it. But here from this platform of the Symbiosis Law School in Greater Noida, I'll appeal and urge all those administrators, including the Bar Council of India, those people who are at the helm of affairs in the Bar Council of India, all the vice chancellors of the National Law Schools of India, to acknowledge the pioneering contribution made by Professor Rahamatullah Khan. So far as I would say, the concept and the proposal on National Law School is India. We must be humble enough to acknowledge. We must acknowledge every single thing which somebody did for us, We will not be belittled by it, So I'll urge everybody, please do it. It is still not late, although Professor Khan is no more, but I hope, and this is exactly what he said. He said, my proposal was hijacked by the people. But bete, tum rakh lena. When the right time comes, please place it in the public domain. So with his permission, wherever he is, I am putting this in public domain. And I urge everybody to please acknowledge and give, I would say, due to Professor Khan, even if belatedly. Thank you. Now let me try to take you little quickly through some of these things, and if somebody can help me, I need to screen a video. This is the founding, they are called the Big Three, who were instrumental in the establishment of the United Nations, Winston Churchill, FDR Roosevelt, and Stalin, Joseph Stalin from Russia. And the fourth person you cannot see here, he was the then French Premier General, de Gaulle. He is not there in the picture because these three people didn't like him. So he was not there at the part of the original thing. But the confabulations took place in Tehran, Moscow, Dumbarton-Ox, Potsdam, San Francisco, etc., etc., even when the Second World War was still going on. And finally, it saw the light of the day on 26th of June, 1945, in that opera house in San Francisco City. And finally, the charter took the shape, So I hope I can screen that little 2 minutes of audio, which will try to put the whole thing little in perspective, by the then American President Harry Truman. Because by that time FDR was no more. By the time the charter took the concrete shape, so as his Vice President Harry Truman took over as the President of the United States of America, and the honor went to him, to do the things. Yeah. Yeah.
We all have to recognize, no matter how great our strength, that we must deny ourselves the license to do always as we please. No one nation, no regional group can or should expect any special privilege which harms any other nation. If any nation would keep security for itself, it must be ready and willing to share security with all. That is the price which each nation will have to pay for world peace. Unless we are all willing to pay that price, no organization for world peace can accomplish its purpose. and what a reasonable price that is. Out of this conflict have come powerful military nations, now fully trained and equipped for war. But they have no right to dominate the world. It is rather the duty of these powerful nations to assume the responsibility for leadership toward world peace. That is why we have here resolved that power and strength shall be used not to wage war, but to keep the world at peace and free from the fear of war. By their own example, the strong nations of the world should lead the way to international justice. That principle of justice is the foundation stone of this charter. That principle is the guiding spirit by which it must be carried out, not by words alone, but by continued, concrete acts of goodwill. Now, there's a time for making plans, and there's a time for action. The time for action is here now. Let us, therefore, each in his own nation and according to its own way, seek immediate approval of this charter and make it a living thing.
Yeah, okay. Screen bada kar dena. Yeah. So I will move forward now. Let me with that solemn the crux of the what Harry Truman said on 26th of June 1945 in that opera house in San Francisco, that encapsulate the spirit, that the United Nations did not come a day earlier. It was built upon the ashes of the League of Nations, and there is a question which we need to ponder over after 78 years. Have we lived up to the expectations of those founders of the United Nations? And as I said, it was not a perfect thing, including because of the special thing, 5 permanent members which were there, veto power, all those limitations we have to accept. Sometimes, you need to accept the inequalities inherent in a life, and yet you need to move on. You don't need to, and here are the pictures of that great moment, Now let me turn to the second part as to how, third part as to how the United Nations had worked, And here is the map of the UN system. I'm sure all of you will be able to see. So there are principal organs of United Nations: the UN General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council. There is Secretariat, International Court of Justice, and the Tertiary Council. 2 last organs, have been kept outside the loop because of the reason that the International Court of Justice is located in The Hague. It's a principal legal organ of United Nations. It's an inextricable part of the charter. This is the only organ which is located outside New York headquarters, for the simple reason that the predecessor court was associated with the League of Nations, and that's the only organ which had a continuity from the League of Nations to the United Nations. It had the archives were kept passed on to the new organization. All the judges of the Permanent Court of International Justice became the judges of the International Court of Justice when it took place. It's located in The Hague, at the Peace Palace. And the Trusteeship Council of United Nations, which I will deal with later, it became dormant after 1994 when all its existing agenda was over. And so that leaves me with other organs. The Economic and Social Council, it is deals with economic, social, health, cultural. It's too unwieldy. It has too many agenda items on its thing. But it is a discussion chamber where plenty of good things take place. So my focus of this thing, will be in terms of what they actually do. And the question is there any scope for tightening, revitalizing things, and how international law is interwoven as a part of this, because the charter is a product of international law. It's a multilateral treaty. Okay, that we need to remember. It's a multilateral treaty which the sovereign state themselves created. It's an instrumentality of international law, and that is why the not only the content of the charter but the practices and the procedures which have taken shape, around the Charter of United Nations can be construed to have become part of the what is called United Nations law. And I would say at this 78th anniversary, the time has come that we need to at least, even as a part, inextricable part of international law, to study what I call United Nations law. Need to know the entity which has really survived, is irrespective of couple of those failures, because the failures always get highlight, media attention, even if few %. And I'll show how the United Nations, keeps working, Now here is something what I will say in terms of the contribution of this majestic entity, people will say, what has United Nations done, and because we, as the time passes, we really forget, the very fact that this is the only forum that we have, this is the only forum where you wanted to really turn to. This is the only forum, where the sovereign equality of states has been reiterated, at least in the General Assembly of United Nations. And this is the only democratic organ which really, where everybody wanted to be there. That is the reason why in the month of September, all roads lead to New York. Everybody wants to be there. Powerful states, small states, island states, including the National Liberation Movement. That majestic moment when on 19th of November 1974, when the then head of a PLO, which was called the terrorist group, was invited to the forum of the General Assembly, and standing on that podium, he addressed the World Assembly, saying that I have come here to seek peace from you, and since then that day, what earlier was the PLO is now called the Palestine. It's called non-member observer state. We should not still lacking that statehood. That credit goes to United Nations and the General Assembly. So huge number of those issues ranging from decolonization to the human rights, permanent sovereignty on natural resources, ending racial discrimination, right to development, environment protection strategy, the 1970 Stockholm Conference, women's rights, political rights of the woman, ending apartheid. These are the classical battles which are made. And the very fact that as Harry Truman said, when the charter was signed, there were only 50 signatories, only 50 signatories. Today you have 193 sovereign countries as members of United Nations. That means the membership has grown fourfold. International law has grown both vertically and horizontally. This is unbelievable. So United Nations played a very pivotal role. Large part of the international world community was under colonial yoke when the United Nations came, even including India. We were also still under colonial rule. But India it was made an exception for India. That 2 years before India's independence, Indian delegation was allowed, to put a signature, on the Charter of United Nations. 1945, I am talking. 26th of June, 1945, India became independent on 15th of August, 1947. So that credit goes to the Charter. What was impossible, the Charter made it possible. The organization made it possible, where technically, theoretically, all states were sovereign and equal. Now, this was also another landmark kind of occasion, 25th anniversary of the United Nations, where popularly, I am sure for the students also this will be of interest, where it was popularly called the Friendly Relations Declaration, which reiterated and reaffirmed what the Charter spoke about. After 25 years, you look back and thought that this kind of I would say, innovation is always possible. When there is a dire crisis, some kind of a contingency, when you have the doubts about the working or not working of the organization, this is exactly the Friendly Relations Declaration resolution, General Assembly Resolution 2625 of 24th of October 1970. And a lot of people have had the skepticism, like Ambassador Fabian also mentioned, that, by virtue of Article 11 of the Charter of United Nations, that the legal character of the resolutions of the UN General Assembly, do they work, do they not work, etc., etc. But I would say that, barring those exceptional cases, overwhelmingly, I would say the General Assembly resolutions have the legal character. They have contributed in the development of law, the treaty making processes, through series of the tools and techniques and the procedures. It's amazing kind of, I would call it, the remarkable engineering at work within the Charter of United Nations, innovation at work. The Assembly itself construed a lot of those things, on like the equal rights, the prohibition of use of force, non-intervention, peaceful settlement of disputes, sovereign equality of states, international cooperation, and principle of good faith, so far as the compliance with the treaties are concerned. And here are a couple of this listing of those major areas where United Nations dabble into what is called the global conferencing technique, ranging from space issues, outer space, environment, disarmament, human rights, issues of women, and population. These are the huge areas where United Nations dabbled into that. Success, failure, because one of the primary purpose will be spreading awareness. You don't need to use the harsh language that everything is automatically workable, Things don't work automatically even within the domestic jurisdiction. We know it very well, You have the stringent legislation, and yet you have the, like we had the, criminal law amendment in 2018, imposing the death penalty for that kind of a gang rape, etc. You think that it really had the effect on it? Actually, the rate of those things actually grew by more than 27%. That means the human mind works in a different way. Law cannot penetrate the mind, and that is exactly what here much more difficult so far as the sovereign states are concerned. But United Nations has put into place all the diplomatic community, and they are there sometime at the heads of state, heads of government level, sometime at some other level. And here at the high level summits and conferences, which with the theme, the securing the well-being of the people and the planet, A large number of United Nations does a lot of this juggling, balancing exercise, calling the small island states, developing countries who cannot even afford to send one delegate. United Nations pays for the expenses. Look at the world that we have, so much unequal, and yet you take them on board. Series of those grievances, the issues which are sought to be addressed within. There is no other forum where you can go and speak about it. Issues of peace, dignity, equality on a healthy planet. Again, the summits and the conferences, these are listed for 2023. And again, the huge calendar where the United Nations system will deal with all those issues. I wanted to just flag this. And now, so far the reform talk is concerned. Everybody talks about reforming United Nations, revitalizing United. There is no harm in doing that, because you always try to chisel your tools, try to see whether the instrumental is work, is it adequate so far as the needs of a particular time are concerned. No entity is perfect, nothing is perfect. Law also must change with the changing times. So is the case with the organization also. But the problem, we need to examine whether the problem, where does the problem lie? Is it in your political will, or is it with the instrumentality? There is per se nothing wrong with the instrument. You need to, that is exactly why I repeatedly hammer, you need to make it work. You need to make United Nations work. You need to make international law work. Like the Secretary General of United Nations was here, I think, during the G20 summit, and somebody asked him the question, that the Russia and Ukraine, that the war is going on, the United Nations has failed. Don't you think that United Nations cannot do anything? He said, why do you put blame to that? You chose to fight. The only choice is you stop fighting. You stop fighting. I can't catch hold of you. I can't catch hold of you. You need to do that. The purpose, as I said, like one of the very prominent foreign ministers said, that the purpose of bringing United Nations was not to take the humankind and planet Earth to the heaven, but to stop them going to the hell, living hell. And the very fact that 1/4 of the world today lives in the conflict zone. 1/4. Out of the 8 billion population on planet Earth, 2 billion people live in conflict zones. Unbelievable kind of the misery and torture. You can see the things which are happening, as Ambassador Fabian said, Israel and Palestine. Dehumanizing of the entire thing. The entire international humanitarian law has been thrown through the wind. Everybody speaks saying that even the laws have the rules. Please stop. Indian Prime Minister said repeatedly that this is not the era of war. It was never the era of war. Wars were never permissible, never were there. Always the humankind struggled to tame the beast, to ensure. I teach a course called, Legal Controls of International Conflicts, Outlawry of War. Every time you tried, it didn't succeed. You didn't succeed. And so that the problem lies somewhere else, And here are some of the, I thought I'll just give you a little peep into the world which we live in. You need to remember the world in which we live in, and that is exactly how you need to measure up the success, the failure, or we need to remember at the 78th anniversary of the United Nations, that what kind of world we are living in. Is it really worth living for? Is it really worth living for? Have we made our lives well? Although unbelievable technological progress has taken place, Humankind has gone to the Mars and Moon and all celestial bodies we are going. We don't know tomorrow we'll start living somewhere else also, But you made our life, our own life miserable on planet Earth. And I remember again those wise words of the late Indian Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. In chaste Hindi, he said, इंसान चांद पर तो पहुंच गया, but उसको धरती पर एक मनुष्य बन के रहना नहीं आया. You went to the moon, but you didn't know how to live as a human being on this planet Earth, And that is exactly your predicament. You need to see that how you behave at least as a human being, to have empathy for fellow human beings and other creatures and to your environment. You make your life miserable otherwise, and for the future generations will really suffer, The time will not permit me to go into this list, but I think couple of those issues I have listed, 6, 7. There are numerous others like the world without glacier. The other day, UN Secretary General was in Nepal. At the backdrop of the Himalayas, he said the glaciers are melting. Most of the Himalayan river, Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Ganges will gradually have the lower flow of water. Imagine the consequences in the years to come. And he said, I am crying out from the top of the world, rooftop of the world, like that small little sparrow, she was moving, running from pillar to the post, when her own forest was on fire, The predicament of the UN Secretary General is literally like that lonely sparrow. She keeps complaining, she keeps shouting, and people don't listen to him. You have the huge humanitarian crisis. More than 339 million people, they need immediate humanitarian assistance. You can see the situation in Gaza and holes of those, people are dying, desperate. The UN depots have been raided. Look at the condition, just to survive, Who created this kind of a situation, You need to quickly address this malaise, You need to address, and it's a question of millions of people, 339 million people you are talking about, Extreme climatic events, the consequences are there for anybody to see, and again the food crisis, huge food crisis, 16 million people, they have the food crisis in 100, and again 15 countries around the world, and there is also exacerbated violence against women and girls around the world. Unbelievable enhancement in violence against women and girls. Out of the 2 billion people, they say 660 million women and girls, they live in the conflict zones. 660 million women and girls, they live in the conflict zones. And you have the poverty, again it has exacerbated, unbelievable, although we kept talking about elimination of poverty. You have the violence against women, I already mentioned 736 million women, almost one out of 3 women have been subjected to physical and or sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. And this does not include sexual harassment. This does not include sexual harassment. In EU alone, the cost of this sexual and gender-based violence is considered to be 366 billion euro, out of which violence against women alone constitutes 79%, 289 billion euro. And the people who live in the conflict zones, again that's again a big issue. Now let me come to quickly to couple of these areas which one is talking about so far as the specific UN reform agenda is concerned. It talks about development, management, peace. The your system has been this Secretary General, after taking over at the head of the organization, has been addressing some of these issues. And starting with the role which the General Assembly of United Nations itself has played, what I call as the conductor of a grand orchestra. And here are a couple of those series of those events which took place, were scheduled in the month of September alone. The high level summits, heads of state, heads of government, which were convened on 18th and 19th of September 2023 to address, the plight, the future of the sustainable development goals, on financing for development, on pandemic, universal health coverage, and also there is a planning for having a summit of the future in next year, summit, September 2024. And here was again the General Assembly, the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations on the job in Brasilia. She went there, to bring the Brazilian system on board, and took the message of the Secretary General, to different parts of the world. So UN system is already, on the job, at work, trying to address the problems which we face today and also for the future. And the General Assembly resolutions have also acted as a constitutional instrument. This is again a different debate. I will not have the time. Like one of the concrete example is the resolution 2997, which established the United Nations Environment Program. So this is also very remarkable contribution, where a resolution of the General Assembly, people say it's not legally binding, and here it created an international environmental institution which has a global presence. Although it's not an international organization, it's not a treaty, but yet it works. Yeah, and here is the map of the global conferencing, all those 1972 to 2022, the General Assembly, how it dabbled with most of those conferencing techniques, try to address these, it like lot of enormous resources, effort, planning, and the message which it conveys, that is exactly what we, once it does done, we teach these things in the classrooms, students write their term papers, write their dissertations, speak, you have the model United Nations, etc., where you talk about the contribution of the United Nations. That is exactly the best way to spread the United Nations message, And here is the role which the Security Council has to play, and Security Council, I have listed couple of those things just for the purpose of record, that every year the Security Council addresses issues ranging from artificial intelligence to terrorism to women, peace and security, and host of those troubled zones around the world, every single day. There are often occasions when the Security Council, like here on the issue of Israel, Palestine also, the 4 times the Security Council met. Each time the resolution were defeated because of the exercise of veto by some of the powers, and yet again it keeps meeting. That speaks volumes about the divergence of interest, competing considerations, whatever the consideration the states have, So the problem is with you. You don't let the Security Council work. The instrument per se has no fault, The moment you surrender or you try to compromise with your egos, you let that go, the institution will work. The bottlenecks you have to be removed, And the action on the peacekeeping, huge amount of the terrain, where the peacekeeping operations is unbelievable amount of the contribution with the United Nations making, and plenty of the part where Indian peacekeepers are there. In fact, India took the lead to have all women peacekeeping force, in a country like Liberia. All women contingent, for instance, India is one of the biggest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operation. And you go there in the trouble zones, where the UN compounds are attacked, dead bodies come home. Dead bodies, they come home, You go into look at the barbarity, look at the venom that you have, look at the hatred that you harbor in places like Haiti, in Democratic Republic of Congo, or in Rwanda, in host of those places. The question is, you don't have a magic wand, You go there to settle, you go there to ensure people don't fight. Then the UN compounds are attacked, UN personnel are attacked, because they don't have the order to fire upon the civilian population, for instance, And you ask question as to why the problem is not resolved. Because those warring factions, there are resource related conflicts, huge amount of resource related conflicts. There are many parts of the world, and I suggest you to please read the Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 2018 by Denis Mukwege and Nadia Murad, when Nobel Peace Prize was given, on the issue of use of sexual violence as a weapon of warfare. Look at what Denis Mukwege says. He said, my country is the richest country in the world, and yet it is the poorest. All those mobile phones and the gadgets which you carry, that carry some of the minerals which are produced in my country. And why should my country be so troublesome? You never let it have peace, for instance. All warring factions are there. The resources have become their curse, So look at the problem that you have, How can United Nations put a lead on those people? So that's the nature of the problem. So I'm talking about the very hazardous nature of the job, the very fact that the organization is on the job, which you don't visualize, which you don't see. You want quick results. There are no quick results. You are dealing with human beings who are very difficult creatures, Here, women, peace and security, for more than 20 years, the Security Council has been dealing with this issue. It's again a huge area where women has been issue of challenges faced by women have been sought to be mainstream. There are plenty of those resolutions, almost 10 dedicated resolutions have been adopted by the UN Security Council, You have the subsidiary organs. I'm talking as to how each of the organ, people have pessimism. You talk only in terms of the action taken by the Security Council. Here are the actions concretely taken by the Security Council. Security Council went on establishing 4 independent ad hoc criminal tribunals. One was Rwanda, second was Yugoslavia, third was Sierra Leone, fourth was Lebanon. To ensure the post-conflict justice mechanism takes place, where the people fought wars, In Rwanda alone, 800,000 people were massacred, 800,000 people were killed. Yugoslavia had enormous problems. And yet you have the post-conflict justice mechanism which United Nations did, And I just flip through it. I will not speak anything about it because the time will not permit, but look at the number of witnesses, the courts and the jurisdiction which each cases, they try to do, different kinds of witnesses, the trial, 2.5 million pages of transcripts in tribunal for ego, 2.5 million pages. Look at the enormous work just to do justice. Only a handful of people are brought and arraigned before it, and this initially took place in The Hague. Like the Yugoslavia tribunal took place in The Hague. Rwanda again, initially it was in Hague, and then it was taken to Rwanda proper, And here is Rwanda. Only 93 individuals were indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. You have the special tribunal for Lebanon. This was again for assassination of one sitting Prime Minister of Lebanon, Rafik Hariri. And the UN Security Council took the action under Chapter 7, enforcement action, established a tribunal, and caught hold of a couple of those people. So I'm talking about you can have a contrasting example. In Pakistan, the former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto was assassinated and nothing was done. The UN inquiry said there are telltale evidence, of premeditated murder. And the Pakistan government was not interested to have any UN, because the UN inquiry pointed the gun, all evidence was destroyed, and finally, but it did not lead to a kind of international kind of a tribunal to punish and prosecute the people. So countries themselves, they have their own hands, You had in Cambodia, it was too late. By the time 1/3 of the Cambodian population was massacred. By that time, Pol Pot was gone. By the time when this extraordinary chamber for Cambodia came to be established, And here is the residual mechanism in Sierra Leone. Again, I'm talking about the trouble zones, conflict zones, where the lives of the people are miserable. Each of those conflict zones. The question is, United Nations does it. It has to raise the funding. It has to find the people, have objectivity, have all the legalities and instruments to be put into place just to ensure, because your national system doesn't work. Your national system doesn't work. We had in our own neighborhood the questions about doing a similar kind of a post-conflict justice mechanism in Sri Lanka or in Nepal. That still defies logic. But the question is the limits of it, limits of these all efforts, global effort that you make, And the Secretary General of the United Nations, I will not have much time to, spend on this, but I'm sure he's one of the very rare Secretary Generals who speaks with that political background, former Prime Minister of Portugal, with that kind of a stature, he speaks truth to power. He speaks very bluntly, he does his homework. You need to at least see the speeches which the Secretary General of the United Nations has done. Amazing, unbelievable amount of energy he carries. He goes from place to place. And how much, I'm sure he must be so troubled, to see, the different things, where, and he has to innovate. He is the one liaison person between the General Assembly, the Security Council. He wants he is the Chief Executive Officer. He ensures the entire, organization runs that the show of the organization is run. Is a visible face of the organization. He has to carry everything, notwithstanding all the hiccups and the problems that you have. Often he goes to the Security Council and tells the permanent members to behave, to do something. He said the time is running out. He speaks, but people must listen to him. We must have the capacity to, pay heed to it, to make things work. If you want United Nations to work, you must pay heed to them. Now let me see, I think the final part, towards our common future, from summit of the future, and how do you walk the talk, and international law instrumentalities will be inextricable part of this entire enterprise which I am talking about. And I thought I'll start with some of the work which I myself did in last 3 years, 3 ideational things, which covered 55 contributions by those outstanding scholars from different parts of the world, different continents actually, and 23, 22, and 2021. These are the seeds. It has sown the seeds. It has laid down some of those ideas for our future, which we are really talking about. And now it will lead us to, next year, the planetary future, which I have listed the names of about 24 outstanding scholars who have sent the confirmations, so ranging from starting with Nick Robinson, Edith Brown-Weiss, Owen Macintyre, Klaus Boselman, Jan Agula, Kazuhiro Nakatani, Benjamin Richardson, Syed Mahmoudi, David Vanderzeg, Oliver Ruppel, Benjamin Bohr, Sin Paine, Patricia Mbote, Oran Young, Jody Jaria Manzano, David Boyd, Evan Darian Smith, Richard McCrory, Veselin Popovsky, Lauren Eastwood, Dr. Karan Singh, Maria Fernanda Espinoza Garces, the former President of the UN General Assembly, Shailesh Nayak, the Director of the NIAS, Bangalore, and finally Nico Sridhar. the emeritus professor at Leiden University and member of the Council of States. So this is the future. This will come out around June 2024, and in September is the summit of the future. So we need this dabbling into, we need to have the scope for finding solutions to those things. We need this ideational thing. You can't crib and complain about it. We need to ensure that it works. Hope against hope, as I call it, audacity of hope. As long as the sun shines, you need to work on it, because that is exactly what the whole ability about being a human is. You cannot give hope, like the Indian Prime Minister himself says, कि हताश हो जाना, नाराज हो जाना, छोड़ देना कि कुछ नहीं होने वाला है, कुछ नहीं. You can't be pessimistic. You can't be pessimistic. I know the odds are very heavy, and challenges are enormous. But it's always there are wise people, few sane people, who really fix it, who will try to come out with the solutions. It's a very, very difficult thing. I would say almost akin to the Gandhian kind of a predicament around the time of the India's independence. And I think if really your earth is, and I remember here I will little differ from what my own teacher Professor Khan told me. He said, "तुम अपने आप कोई solution मत बताना." But I thought that instead of waiting, because we can't wait for somebody to come from the different galaxies and the planets to come here on planet Earth to find the solution. Only the human beings have to do it. And if I do it, why not? And I encourage my students also when they write the PhD thesis, to come out with concrete ideas. Don't hesitate. That no age is not the bar, the level is not the bar. You need ideas. वो किसी का मोहताज नहीं है कोई, ठीक है? So I think we need to do it, and I thought this is an enormous kind of work. I'm sure without resources, and we'll see by the time something it will yield results. And concrete 4 or 5 ideas I will just suggest before I just close. Is what I call as couple of things, like the bird in hand is better than 2 in the bush. I don't want to wait for the utopia. There is no utopia around. It's nothing going to happen if you wait for eternity to take place, because there are already people who have suggested about you invoking Article 109 of the Charter of the United Nations to have a general conference for review of the Charter. The world in which we live in, the kind of the polarization which is at stake, it's literally almost impossible, to have any kind of a general conference, review conference to reopen the Charter. It will be like opening a Pandora's box. So my take will be, knowing the ground realities well, I thought we must tighten the screws, try to see that the organization is made to work, extrapolate, try to use, bank upon that doctrine of implied power, see that, something which you carry by implication and necessity. And the United Nations system has enormous scope for it. Let me give 2 concrete examples, because people are not, that you make it work, although the Charter does not talk about something else. You have the Charter, the 5 permanent members. One is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The USSR is gone. And it's the Russian Federation which has stepped into the show. The Charter still speaks about Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. There was no observer system. The Charter is wedded to the sovereign states. And they created, the credit goes to again a professor of international law, a Belgian scholar, Eric Sui, who invented this idea of having an observer system. International system was used to it. So that is exactly what brought the national liberation movement within the domain of the United Nations. So the United Nations not only limited to sovereign state, but observers like Vatican and Palestine, and also there are other observers also, or like bringing in a deputy secretary of the United Nations. The Charter does not talk about it. So you can always innovate, extrapolate, by implication, something which is inevitable, something which is destined, something which you are expected to do. The question is, if the something which was not foreseen in 78 years ago, if you can make sense of it, if you can interpret, constructive, positive, that is exactly what the legal interpretation is all about, make it work. Any legal law which a judge will be sitting on the chamber, he'll say, I'll do the positive, constructive interpretation to make this law work for the benefit of the people, for the humankind, and that is exactly what the task challenge which we have, rather than complaining and cribbing about it. And I thought we can reap the low-hanging fruits, because the enormous, having done the work, having been privy to the whole thing, I know is going to be people are going to be very selective. It's going to be different work. So why not we reap the fruits, which are really low hanging, which is easy, no cost. And here are the low cost, I would say, the low hanging fruits, like one of the important instrumentally to address some of the global problems, like you have 16 specialized agencies dealing with numerous subjects except environment, you don't have a specialized agency, which I have been talking for last many years, and I think it's the UN Environment Program sitting in Nairobi, which again credit goes to India to allow Nairobi to have the headquarters of the then Indian Prime Minister. She said, let Nairobi have it, let Africa have this. For the first time, a major institution was located to Nairobi on the African continent, So I think the time has come to upgrade this entity into a specialized agency. It has been inching gradually closer to it, but finally the trappings of whatever called the treaty making competence and other things, it must have the final culmination, what I call as the United Nations Environment Protection Organization. Second important is again the repurpose of the Trusteeship Council. I have been speaking about it since 1999. People had closed the chapter. A lot of people had taken a saying that this is something not doable, it's not practical. After 20 years, the Secretary General of United Nations in his report in 2021, Our Common Agenda, said the time has now come to repurpose the Trusteeship. And this is the only proposal. This is the only proposal, I would say, if I don't talk about the globally, at least from the global south, this is the only scholarly proposal which has really given the flesh and bones into the revival and the repurpose of the Trusteeship Council. Change the mandate. It can be done by changing the rules of procedure. It can be done through very innovative, without even formal amendment of the charter. It's doable. That is exactly where human innovation is required. That kind of a legal niceties which you can put without, if the amendment of the charter can work, fine. If it doesn't work, I would say we need to work around it. There are plenty of the practices and the procedures where you made it work, and that is the time where you need to do that part. The third important part which I thought I'll mention, is the Security Council expansion, which every country has been talking about it. We ourselves are part of the whole thing. People with veto, without veto, and you know it very well, that in the foreseeable future, this is not going to be happening anywhere. So the question is, I think all that you have been asking for is, your voice must be heard. You must be there. Like India was member of having a non-permanent seat of the UN Security Council for 2 years, till December 2022. So there are those P4 countries like India, Japan, Germany, and Brazil. They have been, asking for a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. No one is explicitly talking about the veto power. Forget about the veto power, because veto wielding powers will not allow you to meddle into that. But the question is, if your presence or participation could be ensured somehow, like most of those kinds of top level meetings when the agenda takes place, the Security Council president in a particular month invites not only the other states, NGOs, but also even scholars also, and other some relevant people who are there. Although very rarely the Security Council reach out to call a scholar from this part of the world, because New Delhi is too far from New York, So I think that we need to crack it. Then you must look beyond it, and obviously we need to have those scholars who will be doing work of that level, which will really address the global problematic. So there is always innovations and possibilities where you rope in. You can make a regular practice also, where monthly meetings, most of these countries, maybe the P5, there are some countries from African continent, like the BRICS countries will also want it, So instead of 15 members, assuming you add 10 more, who can be part and parcel of the routine thing, part of the confabulation, discussions, etc. Maybe at the time when a final vote is taken, probably they may not do that, but that's fine. That is what the observer system is all about. The very fact that your presence is there, you are present in the room, you are listening to talk, you are able to contribute to the debate, that itself is a major difference. So I would say, till pending any such future, remote possibility for expansion of the UN Security Council, you keep talking and grieving about it. Everybody, Indian Prime Minister has repeatedly said that the United Nations belongs to the different era. We need to revitalize it, for instance. And in one of the meeting addressed to the G20 in Riyadh, he said, we need to have what is called the trusteeship for the planet. He has spoken till that time. The question is, what next? So these are, I'm talking the concrete issues and ideas which are there. And the other final part could be, now we are gradually inching toward the future of what is called the future generations, for instance, that what will they inherit? With the conflicts which I am talking about, 1/4 of the world in 2050, again you have the 10 billion population. We need 3 planets to sustain this human population on planet Earth. 3 planets. You don't have the resources. And with huge amount of conflicts, what will you live? You imagine the plight of the people, those children, unbelievable amount of children who have killed, more large number of children and women who have been killed, for instance, or the children who are brought up in the conflict zone. Imagine the trauma which they undergo, for instance, do we really deserve that? Where are those wise people, where are those globetrotters, where are those special envoys, who thought that they will crack the world, who will resolve the issues? Everybody must be on the job. This has to be got the top priority. The UN system is on the job. A lot of people, UN Secretary General, his envoys, his people are there. But the peace, like Mahabharata, in Mahabharata also Lord Krishna and everybody said, there is no substitute for peace. There is no substitute for peace. War is not the answer. If it was true in Mahabharata, period of Mahabharata, the same is true today also. Peace has no substitutes. Peace has to be the final choice. Wars must be banished. And I think for that, we need to really have those things, and especially, so far, where do you head, for instance? And I would suggest concretely that maybe the time has come when the Secretary General of the United Nations can move, or have a concrete, appoint somebody as the United Nations High Commissioner for future generations. There could be many other innovations which could be possible, for instance, Not moving. Okay, so I will just skip this part. The UNEPO outline I have already mentioned about it. This is available in some of my works. So please feel free. Even if you write UNEPO, the Google will tell you the articles and everything. United Nations Environment Protection. This is the blueprint which is suggested, and the Trusteeship Council which I am talking about. And here is the thing. Modification of Article 86, 87, and 88 of the Charter, writing concretely about those key. What mandate it will have? Now this is what the Secretary General of the United Nations suggested. Repurpose of the United Nations. So what do you suggest as a repurpose? What do you suggest as a repurpose? And you need concretely that idea as a mandate. New mandate for environment and the global commons. Here is again the same article which are rewritten, as a part of this part of the whole thing, And finally, let me come back again to what my teacher had suggested, in drawing the UN mandate at the 78th anniversary of United Nations, like what the reparations case said, that ICJ took the view on the quantum of the rights and duties, of the UN as different from the states, And ICJ said that whereas a state possesses the totality of the international rights and duties recognized by international law, the rights and duties of an entity such as organization must depend upon its purposes and functions as specified or implied in its constituent instrument. So the whole idea is what is implied. Not everything is in black and white, and we know it very well. There are many of the legislations that is exactly the job of a creative lawyer, or job of a voracious or like a judge who is a philosopher, to read between the lines. And I remember vividly my interaction with the late Justice P.N. Bhagwati as a student, and I wrote a tribute to Justice Bhagwati, a judge as a philosopher, That judge sees things which you can't see. Judge interprets things, which are generally not within the domain of a layman, And you need to, because you want overall the system to work, the law to work. So you need to have positive, constructive interpretation, where, there's something, if this organization has to be made to work, you need to have that something by what I call necessary implication, And this brought the whole range of the functions and powers of that organization exercised in the course of the practice under the cover of the legality. And sufficient attention had to be paid to accretion of the powers through usage and practice. You need to develop that use and practice, something which is by implications. What I call, like in the legal arena, you call analogy. If there is no directly relevant practice or precedent is available, you derive something from the closest possible area, and you apply that to the particular problem which you need to resolve. Similarly, something by implication. It is implied, it is read between the line, it is presumed that you need to do this, Unless you do it, how do you, unless you have the wherewithal, unless you have the means, how can you deliver the results, for instance, And your larger purpose is the future of the humankind, future of this planet Earth itself. And I thought that this is exactly what it will show, so far as the So with these I think I'll try to just sum up my thing, although it exceeded some time, but what I'll try to suggest is that at this time when I recall at the 78th anniversary of the United Nations, and on this occasion when I remember and recall the pioneering work done by my own teacher on law of international organization, his grasp over that particular interpretation of the provisions of the Charter of United Nations, the actual working of the Charter of United Nations for it, the nitty-gritty of it. And as I said, he had excellent command over English language. He'll write few words, excellently communicate those things, and that is what many of his writings they speak volumes about it. And I thought I was trying to imbibe the best from him. That is exactly what I'll do from anyone. I'll take only the positive things, best things from my own teachers, and I thought I'd try to walk the talk. I tried to do justice to whatever was possible under very difficult circumstances. And so and as I said, I didn't just come here to do my mundane job here, and I thought I'll try to go into the deeper aspects of the intricacies of international law with that kind of a approach where the not to try to find fault with international law or United Nations, as I said, to make it work, and for which you need to walk the talk. You need to do work at that level. And here I would say there is also onus on a country like India, where we need to, as I suggested at the different levels also, we need to strengthen our own knowledge architecture, our schools of law and elsewhere, and we need to do justice, I would say, taking international law seriously, making international law work. And if you do so, I'm sure the United Nations will also be able to deliver the results, rejecting the negativity, rejecting the kind of those views, that don't you think that United Nations cannot fail, if you allow it to work. We need to make it work. And on this 78th anniversary, that you need to find the ways and means, like they say, you have the bypass, if there is a bottleneck or blockade by some recalcitrant people, there are, as we know, in the field of international law also, there are gatekeepers. Like my teacher was never allowed to have his due. He was the only one who was not allowed. He was not nominated to the Institut de Droit International. He had the impeccable credentials. He just, I do not want to say much in the public domain today. But it was the greatest. Whosoever did it, it was greatest disservice, to his legacy. And we must pay the dues of those, everybody, every scholar and every legacy of scholarship which my own center carried, and I'm trying my best, and I hope I made my teacher proud. And wherever he is, if he is listening to this lecture, he'll say, lovely, marvelous. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, your expertise, your personal experiences, the valuable lessons, and the passion for the topic have illuminated the path towards a more collaborative and harmonious global future. As you highlighted the importance of charters in making the impossible to the possible, widening horizon of the state-centric system, have had a comprehensive exploration of the challenges and opportunities in revitalizing the United Nations. Once again, thank you so much, sir. Well, I sense a palpable atmosphere of intellectual curiosity amongst the crowd. Due to the paucity of time, we will be entertaining 3 questions. So you're requested to kindly stand up, introduce yourself, and then commence with the question.
First of all, a very warm welcome to our law school, sir. Sir, this side. Sir, my name is Jyoti. I'm a second-year learner. My question to you is that how can nations strike a balance between their own interests as well as the cooperation for getting all the nations also to get into the promotion? what are your thoughts in it, that pursuing their own self-interest also and as well as the interest of all the other nations? What could be the things they should keep in mind, and what are your thoughts in it?
Well, I think we need to have a little more, flexible approach. We need to have the wider, horizons, and what is missing in this entire, international diplomatic circle is obviously there are people who are troubleshooter. There are people who really, want, but they have been doing the rounds. They have been cracking it, working behind the scene, trying to blunt the edges of those things. Behind the scene they work. Because there are strong, because ultimately you are human beings. You have strong things. Whether you retaliate, whether you reciprocate, or you eschew it. There are two ways of doing things. If there is somebody, like you say, we just had the Dashera day, the victory of good over evil, Either you go to the level of the evil, or you stand by. Although it's very difficult. It hurts your ego, it hurts your self-respect, or whatever things, So there are different ways in which your value system will tell you that not always, and that will save you from any kind of a bitterness. Any kind of that strong feelings that you have. That is the biggest contribution. If you nurture, harbor, like what somebody said, I will not spare you, I will not leave you, that will not lead anything. Like what Gandhi himself said, eye for eye, makes both the people blind. So if there are those people who are, how do you bring them on board? And you need the people who are very wise, people who really nudge them, really push them to come on board. That is exactly how the solution will be there on any of those problems which you face, so far as the international organization on its own cannot do anything. Okay. Again, you need to rely upon the person. We don't know. In the future, probably, instead of the living person, they might, probably you might even have the humanoids, or some kind of a robots might be also on, but that will be too risky to trust the robots, because they are human creatures, So a human creation cannot be better than the original ones, They will also carry the same vices, So that much is guaranteed. So whether you will create much more problem, but you need to have that. What I was mentioning as the world we live in, is that you must be sensitive about these problems which are there, Does it really pinch? Does it really hurt you or not? How do you justify anything? Till there are people around, who do not live, peacefully. Average, like the conflict zones, they say the average time for you to between life and death is 30 seconds or 50 seconds. Whenever a siren blows, is that the life worth living? For territory, but the moment you do it, like European Union, European countries did it. 27 countries they came together. Today you ask any European countries, where is the border between Luxembourg and Belgium? They won't be able to. It's there on a road, where a restaurant where you sit, to have a coffee. One side is Luxembourg, the other side is Belgium. You made the border so irrelevant, The same Europe. So this is doable. This is possible. So we need to, again, you need solution. You need the ideas to crack it, And I think we need institutionalized structure, And at least in my own country, my own, I would say, the place where I work, this is exactly what I have been talking about. That we need. I had the Making SIS Visible program in my own school, thinking that my colleagues will rise. We have 100 people, that problems around the world, where else it will happen. We need to crack it. We need to find the solution. This is what lot of people, the ideas ultimately will. The politicians will go on the job, or the diplomats will go on the job on the strength of those ideas, And I thought that will make it happen, If you really want to resolve plenty of them. That is how it has been done in the past also, and it can happen in the present times and also in the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving your thoughts.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Varnika Bhardwaj. I'm a third-year learner. So my question to you is that in this multitude of ongoing conflicts in the world today, be it the terrorist insurgencies in Algeria, Yemen, Uganda, or the civil wars in Afghanistan, Syria, the drug war in Colombia, or the ethnic war in Sudan, what do you think are we, the very basis on which the United Nations was once established, is it losing its footing in the current world scenario? And my question is to both of you, and also the humanitarian aspect. How will the United Nations now regain the trust of its people back in this current world scenario where people are losing faith in humanity and humanitarian resources, that it could be, that a humanitarian world could be established and peace will be established in this world?
I think if you saw, I like that small, small transcript, at Harry Truman's speech in San Francisco. They said it was, destined to bring about peace and justice in the world, for instance, And he said this organization, if it had come little earlier, millions who perished in the Second World War would not have perished. And again, that clip, it's a longer clip, which says, if you fail and falter in making this organization work, millions in the years to come will perish. And is that prophetic prediction came true. You have had numerous conflicts, although the Charter of United Nations, Article 2, Paragraph 4, prohibits threat to peace, breach of peace, act of aggression. You never took it seriously. The very fact that conflicts take place, the question is not the United Nations Charter is not at fault. You don't care. Entity like, for instance, I don't want to take the name of any particular country, because there are countries, people take things in their own hand, they think nobody will catch hold. So there is a sense of impunity. Once you feel like what Denis Mukwege said in the Congo's case, that don't spread red carpets, draw the red lines. That this is not acceptable. Like in a national society, this is not acceptable. The moment you put that, and everybody saying that this is not acceptable, any loss of human life, for instance, reciprocity, even the rules, like the wars also have the rule. The humanitarian aspect has to be there, The very purpose of the laws of warfare is to humanize warfare. Although it's a contradiction in terms that even if you have to fight in a civil manner, you can't fight in a civil manner. But the very fact that war ought not to be the option, but the first war has to be the last option. People have been doing it the first option. Again, the same old primitive kind of a mentality, which you don't have the solution. Probably it seems the human behavior has not changed. And what can United Nations do? The only question is education. You need to keep harping. Some wise people have to keep, these knowledge centers have to keep talking about those things, that this is doable, this is possible. It's not that you don't allow it to happen. And then you put blame on either United Nations or on international law. The problem lies somewhere else. Your own intellect, But law cannot go into the human mind, And we don't have the solution about that part. Yeah.
Thank you for that important but difficult question. I don't have much to add. A good answer has been given, but let us look at it from a slightly different, what shall I say, angle. Geometry and diplomacy, they go together. We were told about the inaugural address given by President Truman, June 1945, correct? All right. And he said, that every country and group of countries should know that they should subordinate their interest to the larger interest of humanity. Correct? What did President Truman do on the 6th of August 1945? Tell me. Can anyone tell me? All right. And he repeated it. Now, why did he do that? The explanation given was it was to make Japan surrender. Correct? That is the standard explanation given by American scholars. All right, now let's dig into it. On the 6th, there was this terrible thing, and the foreign minister of Japan, who was part of the higher, higher war council, he asked the prime minister, let's have a meeting. And the prime minister said, no. They have been bombing us for the last couple of weeks, or more than that. This is terrible, but, they have been doing it. All right? Then, on the 9th of August, there was a meeting. And on the 9th of August, the second attack, Japan decided to surrender. So the standard popular history is because of the second attack, and of course also because of the first attack, Japan decided to surrender. But let me tell you what happened. On the 8th of August, Soviet Union declared war on Japan because they had a 5-year treaty for, neutrality. And that would have lasted till 1946. But Stalin decided to revoke that treaty, and once the Japanese heard that, the Prime Minister wanted to have an urgent meeting. And in that meeting, Japanese decided, look, we can't take on the United States and the Soviet Union at the same time, because Soviet tanks had started moving. And that was the reason why Japan decided to surrender, because the meeting concluded in Tokyo without knowing that the second attack had taken place. So the standard explanation given by American scholars is wrong. Now, going back to Truman, we should make a distinction between rhetoric and policy. We should make a distinction between words and deeds. So, when all those wonderful speeches are made in New York and elsewhere, tell me, how many of them really mean it? And let me tell you from experience. We have a disarmament agency in Geneva, disarmament conference. It used to be called 18 Nations. I can tell you one thing, not all the permanent representatives to the disarmament conference are keen on disarmament. Many of them want more armament. In other words, make a distinction between rhetoric and policy. Now, why is it so? To understand that, we have to go back all the way to Thomas Hobbes. That is, it's a war of all against all. Why? Because there is the so-called myth of sovereignty, a legal myth of state sovereignty. Now, if you are sovereign, and if you don't even respect what you sign into, well, then why do you sign? And last point I want to make is that we all should recognize the state is not a superior being. State is an instrument which we human beings have constructed for our own benefit. And since the state power is exercised by human beings, and since no human being is above ethics, above the moral law, ipso facto, it follows that the state cannot do what is immoral. But let me also qualify that. The state has a legal monopoly over violence. But that monopoly over violence should be exercised with discretion and not without discretion. And what Truman did was without discretion, and what is now happening in Palestine is without discretion, and what's happening in Ukraine is with discretion. That is, these people believe that the state is above morality. That is the real problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
A very good afternoon, sir. My name is Taran Chandana. I'm a second-year learner at here in Symbiosis Law School, Noida. So, first of all, sir, I'd like to welcome you here after our last meet at the IIC. If you remember, I annoyed you and Captain Bakshi with a lot of questions. So now here I'm back with two major questions, which I'll break into one only. So, as per my understanding, international law has always been of a recommendatory in nature and not backed by sanctions or not of any commanding nature, which causes this law not to induce any deterrence in this society. And as per my belief, law should induce that. Now the problem is that if this holds sanctions and binds everyone with it, that would hinder the sovereignty of nations. So, sir, what is the purpose of this law, as the non-understanding of this law has created a sense of havoc in the society? Second part of this question involves, sir, there is a lot of subjectivity relating to international law. Hamas has still not been recognized as a terror group, where as the United States and the EU recognizes them as one. This creates a problem, as this Hamas should be someone which should be acting upon. So my question says, what should be also done about this subjectivity? Thank you, sir.
Well, I think, like you rightly said, subjectivity or selectivity is integral to the whole thing, International law is not devoid of selectivity, because human beings are selective. You ask any person, is that person, free from bias, Each one, have those biases and strong prejudices and those. So that is exactly why, people have been saying that you need to have wider horizons, You need to have wider horizons, You need to have empathy, you need to have those, so that, you don't have a blinkered, myopic view about any such thing, And the issue, specific issue which you mentioned, that the selectivity as far as the, designation of terrorism or terror group are concerned, depending upon convenience, depending upon how it suits you. If it doesn't hurt you, doesn't directly affect you, you are not interested. Before 9/11, for instance, United States was not much serious about terrorism, It came on board. Even today also, when you talk about these different ultras which you mentioned, Hamas, Boko Haram, Houthi rebels, or several others, for instance, IS or Daesh or, Al Qaeda or those, who created them, or Taliban even, for instance, they're actually created by sovereign states, to be used against others, for instance,
Right.
and they become larger than life, Where do they operate? From somebody's soil.
Right.
How do they get the armaments, Somebody provides them. There is a huge global armament industry which is at work, for instance, How do they get the sophisticated weapon? From where does the money come?
Right, sir.
Obviously, it's a nexus, huge amount of thing, Trafficking is there, or resource exploitation, or huge amount of thing from where the money comes, which you buy arms and then you use it again. And there are some people who use it. And there are, as I mentioned, large number of conflicts are resource-driven conflicts in the world, where these rebel groups operate. And they are taken side by some of the either, big, diamond, those multinationals or some others, who really make use of them, So we need to go to the genesis of the root causes of conflicts, How do they operate, for instance, And unless you do that, like I give a concrete example, during the month when India was holding the presidency of the UN Security Council, Indian foreign minister was in New York and he was chairing the session, and a resolution which explicitly wanted to, categorize about terrorism, India was the only country out of 15. Although India held the presidency of the Security Council, India was the only country which was isolated. All 14 countries were on one side. India was saying that this is something of a extremely important. You wanted to give it the top priority. Other countries said, we don't consider that to be a top priority. We have other priorities also, So that is exactly the kind of the perception that you have. For somebody is a life and death, somebody, is a terror group. And also we have had this predicament that one person's, terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. We saw in case of the evolution of the Palestine Liberation Organization, India herself was the one which supported PLO. Yasser Arafat was, always given a red carpet here, and PLO, now that same PLO became Palestine. Now it's a mainstream entity which is holding on to that ramshackle territory called West Bank, for instance. It was mainstream, it has become a non-member permanent. So that is exactly how a lot of things have evolved. Many of the national liberation movement use arms,
Sir,
so the question is, how do you draw the line, in terms of those things? The selectivity has to be jettisoned. That is the problem, not the other issues. A lot of liberation movement, insurgents, or belligerent groups have been working. And without state support, most of these insurgents or belligerent groups will never work, And you need to ensure that they don't proliferate, because they take because here now, probably in Afghanistan, other scenario you might have seen, there are what I'll call, some of the private military and security groups have grown. Okay, so the state doesn't want to be held accountable for those, like in Afghanistan, they use the they're like the private security guards. You use the private military and security groups, where state cannot be catch hold of those doing those things. So these have grown, So the state wants to take a back seat, and we need to. That is why the conflicts don't ebb. Conflicts don't, get really suppressed because of these double standards and the selectivity with the, it is deeply embedded in our international system, Yeah.
Thank you for that question, and I think, we did not have enough time, so we have to have another occasion. But you are asking a question which is pertinent. I will not be able to give you the full answer. I agree with all that has been said. I'll just add 1 or 2 points. One, terrorism. Whom to call a terrorist? Now, way back in Russia, Tsarist Russia, there was a revolutionary called Vera Sassulich. She attacked a governor who had insulted one of her friends. And then you know what she did? She went to the police station and said, I am a terrorist, not a criminal. And here is a gun which I used, and I surrender myself. In other words, she was proud to be a terrorist. You see? Now, coming to, what's happening now in Israel, I wonder whether you heard the BBC saying that why it is not calling Hamas terrorist. BBC said that what they did was atrocious, terrible, condemnable. But terrorist, quote unquote, is a loaded word. So BBC didn't want to use it. But I beg to differ. I will say that what Hamas did was terrorism. And what Israel is now doing is also terrorism. Only thing is that it is state terrorism. Now, you were mentioning, that these groups are there, sometimes states assist them. Correct. But when a state itself commits terrorism, what do we do? And let us look at history carefully. Professor Bharat mentioned about Count Bernadotte, who was assassinated by the terrorist group. Now, why was he there? To implement the UN resolution which provided for State of Israel, State of Palestine, with Jerusalem as an international city, which the Zionists did not want it. So they assassinated him. And you also must have heard about the King David Hotel some time back, before Bernadotte, where another terrorist group, whose leader again became a prime minister. You see? So in other words, Israel is the only state which we can look at now, which was engendered partly by terrorism, partly by United Nations resolution, and, this is very important, partly by the tenacity of purpose, fortitude of the Jews as a race. They were thrown out in AD 70 when the temple was destroyed. But, they had that dream and they had the tenacity of purpose. In other words, history was pregnant with Israel and delivered, almost 2,000 years later. So that tenacity I appreciate, but we should also recognize, how Israel was born. Okay? Now, it's like this, what happens in the Security Council, it is paralyzing itself. Okay? And my take is that Netanyahu is hell-bent on carrying out what he is doing. President Biden is punching below his weight, much, much below his weight. All that he had to do is not even tell Netanyahu. He should just pass on the message, if Netanyahu doesn't stop this state terrorism, you know, every day 300 or more people are killed. And out of the 10,000, almost 6,000 or almost 7,500 are women and children, and they are not terrorists. They are not Hamas. Okay? So all that he has to do is to tell Pentagon, well, delay the supplies by 24 hours, by 48 hours. Netanyahu will get the message. But Biden is not prepared to do that. Why? In America, there is this, what shall I say, motherhood and apple, you know, that is, you cannot dispute it. Israel has a right to defend itself, which means going on killing the Palestinians. You know, logic doesn't apply. One. But there is also, you know, mention was made about arms manufacturers. There is a military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex about which Eisenhower had warned his compatriots way back, saying that, you know, this complex is having undue influence. We should make sure that their influence goes down. But it didn't happen. Now there is a military-industrial congressional complex. Okay? So that is very much there. But to come back, the last point, President Biden also is a candidate in next year. And the Jewish lobby in the United States is very powerful. If you have the time, read up the Jewish lobby and US foreign policy, you know, by Merzheimer and Walt, professor. You know, they are so powerful, you see. So he's a candidate, so he cannot afford. But you know, when you put your private interest above the interest of the nation or the interest of humanity, this is what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, audience, for putting up such wonderful questions. And thank you so much, guests, for sharing your ideas on the same. Moving forward, I would now like to invite upon stage Professor Dr. C.J. Ravandale, Director, Symbiosis Law School, Noida, to kindly come forward and felicitate Honorable Ambassador Fabian. I would like to invite Sir to kindly come forward and felicitate Honorable Professor Dr. Desai. May I please invite Professor Dr. C.J. Ravandale, Director, Symbiosis Law School, Noida, to please come forward and give the vote of thanks for the day.
Namaskar. आदरणीय वाचस्पति, खान संस्मरण पर आयोजित प्रथम पुष्प जो व्याख्यान माला है, उसका आयोजन यहाँ हुआ। And to make you understand it better, it was jointly organized by Symbiosis Law School Pune and Symbiosis Law School Noida. Before I deliver the vote of thanks, यहाँ पर उपस्थित और जहाँ तहाँ उपस्थित सभी जनगण को मन से प्रणाम। There is a shlok in Sanskrit and which makes it clear to the very existence of humankind and then its tribe. जीवितं क्षण विना शिशाश्वतं किमपि नात्र। अर्थ, यह क्षण भंगुर जीवन में कुछ भी शाश्वत नहीं है। I was taught in school, the first school that was my grandmother, and of course the second school which you all followed, going to your schools. And the lesson is very clear. Though there is a song, we are born free, but I have learned that liberty without security is a myth. So there is no need to claim that I have it. So we were born free. Look at the concept of nation. We were born free, we always had that apprehension of being conquered. After attacking and enslaved, then we started grouping together. Then again, that insecurity never vanished. It continued, strong vis-a-vis the weak, then formulation of further groups. And at the end, as there was reference more to Hobbes Rousseau, we gave ourselves the state we call nation in the context of international law. But did it end? No. Then again, nation vis-a-vis other nation, then this tribe, and then we thought, why not have we togetherness, League of Nations, and then came the United Nations. And we still are striving, but we can't forget that liberty without security is a myth. As it is in the honor of Honorable Professor Rahamatullah Khan sir. Well, I have met sir personally. I have heard him while I was back in Pune. I just have few lines for sir in Sanskrit and then Hindi. Vidvattam च नुपत्त च नैव तुल्यम कदाचन स्वदेशे पूज्यते राजा विद्वान सर्वत पूज्यते। राजा और विद्वान में कभी तुलना नहीं हो सकती, क्योंकि राजा अपने राज्य में पूजा जाता है, वही विद्वान जहाँ जाता है वो वहाँ पूजनीय है। So Mr. Khan, when I was listening to Professor Desai, and I could see that though physically he is not with us, but his learnings are still cherished. They have not perished. Rather, they are showing the light to everyone, and it is followed. And in his honor, rather he honored us that we could celebrate this moment and learn more about the international law. I would fail in my gratitude if I do not talk about Ambassador Fabian, sir. I always like his sessions because they are full of wit. So I have something for you too, sir. It's around diplomacy. प्रिय वाक्य प्रदानेन सर्वे तुष्यन्ति जन्तवा तस्मात् प्रियम ही वक्तव्यम वचने का दरिद्रता. It means प्रिय वचन बोलने से सब जन संतुष्ट होते हैं, इसलिए प्रिय वचन ही बोले. प्रिय वचन बोलने से दरिद्रता नहीं आती, तो इसलिए प्रिय वचन ही बोले. And I think that is the crux of diplomacy which you stood by, that it is not the politics, rather the diplomatics which matters, because it takes place behind the scene, but it resolves most of the issues before they come up front. So thank you very much for being there and doing this task so well, sir. Thank you. Now, when I was talking about Professor Khan and when I was listening to Professor Desai, I was happy to see personally that the love of students still resides, is with Professor Desai, and he was fondly remembering. So this is in that regard, sir. न चोरहार्य न राजहार्य न भृत्यु भाज्यम न च भारकारी व्यय कृते वृद्धति एवं नित्यम विद्याधनम सर्वधन प्रधानम। अर्थ, जिसे न चोर चुरा सकता है, ना ही राजा छीन सकता है, ना ही इसे संभालना मुश्किल है, ना ही भाइयों में बंटवारा हो सकता है, यह खर्च करने से भरने वाला धन विद्या है जो सर्वश्रेष्ठ है। And the credit goes to Professor Khan for creating wonderful students like you who are still nurturing the education and pandering vidya to everyone. आपके लिए भी है? Because I could see that good number of you are glued to the seats, some of you by yourself, most of you by the external forces. So when I would read this, but this also goes for me because this is how I have learned in life through my Guruji. उद्यमेन हि सिद्धन्ति कार्याणि न मनोरथै न हि सुप्तस्य सिंहस्य प्रविशन्ति मुखे मृगा। अर्थ, परिश्रम से कार्य सिद्ध होते हैं, केवल मनोरथ से नहीं। सोते हुए सिंह के मुख में मृग स्वयं ही प्रवेश नहीं करता, उसे अपना शिकार स्वयं ही करना पड़ता है। इसको तथ्य में मत लीजिए, अर्थ में लीजिए। Means just to think that I would like to become this because I am inspired makes no sense, because you become what you aspire to become, and for to have that aspiration you have to work by yourself for yourself. So the ones who by themselves attended the whole session and were so involved and so engrossed, you are there and soon will reach to that stage which you want to attain in life. And the ones who came along with friends and were attending this, you also have strived to become, so please continue doing that. I'll fail in my obligation if I do not thank the team at Symbiosis Law School, Pune, including respected Dean, Dr. Gurpur ma'am, Dr. Bindu Ronald, who has been instrumental in giving the entire support, Mr. Balish, and the team at Symbiosis Law School, Noida, so led by Dr. Meenakshi Kaul, Deputy Director Academics, Mr. Bhaskar, Mr. Puneet, Mr. Basant Kumar, Mr. Prashant, Mr. Anish, and the entire student fraternity in the form of volunteers. Thank you very much for making it possible, ladies and gentlemen. So can we have a huge round of applause for everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Without much ado, I would just say it is exact 2:02. So your third lecture is over. So you all would be free in a while, and please enjoy the life. But before the guests on the stage leave, I would request you just to rise, and as we leave, then you can use the exit gate to leave. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
You all are requested to kindly remain seated till the time the guests leave, please.